Hello and welcome to the Minimum Competence episode for Friday, September 26, 2025. I'm your host for today, Andrew Leahy, a tax and technology attorney from New Jersey. On today's episode, spurious charges against James Comey, a $1.5 billion AI copyright deal, and the high-profile defense in the Charlie Kirk murder case. Let's remember, when buying and selling are controlled by legislation, the first things to be bought and sold are legislators. And read today's legal news. On this day in legal history, September 26, 1789, John Jay was commissioned as the first Chief Justice of the United States, marking a foundational moment in the establishment of the American judiciary. Nominated by President George Washington and swiftly confirmed by the Senate, Jay took the helm of the newly formed Supreme Court just one day after the Judiciary Act of 1789 was signed into law. His appointment signaled the beginning of the federal judiciary as a co-equal branch of government under the U.S. Constitution. Jay was already a prominent figure in American political life, having served as the president of the Continental Congress, co-author of the Federalist Papers, and Secretary for Foreign Affairs under the Articles of Confederation. As Chief Justice, he led a court that initially had little authority or docket, with its first session delayed until February of 1790 due to logistical difficulties and a lack of cases. Despite the court's limited power at the time, Jay helped lay the groundwork for its future role. In Chisholm v. Georgia in 1793, Jay authored an opinion asserting federal judicial authority over state governments, a controversial stance that ultimately led to the adoption of the 11th Amendment. His tenure also saw diplomatic service. While still Chief Justice, he negotiated the Jay Treaty with Great Britain in 1794 to resolve lingering post-Revolutionary War disputes. Jay resigned in 1795 after being elected governor of New York and declined a later offer from President John Adams to return to the bench. His brief but influential time as Chief Justice helped define the legitimacy and independence of the U.S. Supreme Court. The U.S. Department of Justice indicted former FBI Director James Comey, escalating what critics describe as President Donald Trump's campaign of retribution against political adversaries. Comey faces two charges, making false statements to Congress and obstructing a congressional proceeding, stemming from his 2020 Senate testimony, in which he denied authorizing anonymous leaks related to an FBI investigation. The indictment claims he actually did authorize such disclosures. However, the charges are notably sparse, lacking detailed supporting facts or corroborating evidence typically included in indictments of this gravity. The case has drawn intense scrutiny within the Justice Department. Prosecutors in the Eastern District of Virginia reportedly advised against filing charges due to insufficient evidence, and the district's top prosecutor resigned last week after expressing concern about political interference. Tensions escalated when U.S. Attorney Lindsay Halligan, formerly Trump's defense attorney, personally presented the case to the grand jury, an unusual move suggesting top-level involvement. Notably, the grand jury declined to indict Comey on a third proposed charge, highlighting doubts about the prosecution's strength. Legal experts and former officials, including Obama-era ethics advisor Norm Eisen, have condemned the indictment as politically motivated. Comey maintains his innocence and says he welcomes a trial. Members of his family, including his son-in-law and daughter, have faced professional consequences, which Comey supporters view as further evidence of political targeting. The charges represent a sharp departure from norms intended to shield law enforcement from partisan use. A federal judge in California has preliminarily approved a $1.5 billion class action settlement between authors and the AI company Anthropic, marking a major development in the legal battles over generative AI's use of copyrighted materials. U.S. District Judge William Alsop described the agreement as fair during a Thursday hearing, though final approval is still pending. Authors Andrea Bartz, Charles Graeber, and Kirk Wallace Johnson brought the lawsuit, accusing Anthropic of training its AI assistant Claude using millions of pirated books without permission. This settlement is the first in a growing wave of lawsuits targeting companies like OpenAI, Meta, and Microsoft for allegedly infringing on creators' rights through large-scale data scraping to train AI models. Although Alsop had previously ruled that some of Anthropic's training practices fell under fair use, he determined the company crossed the line by storing more than 7 million pirated books in a centralized database not strictly tied to AI training. The judge had initially hesitated to approve the deal and demanded further clarification from both sides, but now appears inclined to allow it to proceed to the notification stage for affected authors. If finalized, the agreement could signal a broader shift toward holding AI developers financially accountable for unauthorized content use. Publishing industry leaders have praised the development as a step toward curbing what they see as systemic, unchecked copyright violations in AI development. Anthropic, meanwhile, emphasized its commitment to safe and responsible AI. Catherine Nestor, a seasoned Utah criminal defense attorney and former top federal public defender, has been appointed to represent Tyler Robinson, the man accused of fatally shooting conservative activist Charlie Kirk during a Utah Valley University event on September 10th. The state is seeking the death penalty against Robinson, who faces a charge of aggravated murder. Nestor has a history of representing clients in high-profile and controversial cases. She previously defended Lyle Jeffs, a fugitive leader of a polygamous sect convicted of food stamp fraud, and John Earnest, the gunman in the 2019 Poway synagogue shooting. She ultimately stepped down due to a conflict of interest. She also defended a Utah doctor accused of destroying COVID-19 vaccines, a case later dropped, and is currently representing Corey Richins, a children's author now charged with poisoning her husband. Her firm, Nestor Lewis, has strong ties to Utah's federal public defense system. Her partner, Wendy Lewis, once represented Brian David Mitchell, the man convicted in the kidnapping of Elizabeth Smart. Robinson's case is expected to cost Utah County at least $750,000 for the defense alone, with over $1.3 million budgeted for the total prosecution and defense efforts. Robinson's next court appearance is scheduled for Monday. Nestor has declined public comment on the case. And with that, and as always, I thank you so much for listening to Minimum Competence, your daily news podcast for lawyers. If you're looking for more than Minimum Competence, links to further reading on all the topics touched on today are in the show notes. And reviews go a long way towards helping new listeners to find our show. If you have a moment, leave a rating or review on your podcast player. We'd sure appreciate it. And if you know someone that might be interested in the story we cover, consider sending them the episode. But remember, nothing here should be construed as legal advice because it is certainly not that. Minimum Competence is available at minimumcomp.com and wherever it is you get your finely crafted podcasts. If you haven't checked out the website in a while, give it a look. There are complete transcripts and resources for each episode and its corresponding segments, as well as an opportunity to receive new episodes in email, newsletter, form. We'll see you back here on Monday, and until then, note, we like to close out the week of shows with a featured musical piece that will make these Friday episodes seem especially long. We hope you'll stick it out and enjoy the featured piece, but if music, and specifically classical music, isn't your bag, we get it. Our mouth sounds unrelated to the week's closing music ends here. This week's closing theme is by George Gershwin. Born on September 26, 1898, George Gershwin occupies a unique place in American music history, standing at the intersection of classical composition, jazz improvisation, and Broadway flair. Raised in Brooklyn to Russian Jewish immigrant parents, Gershwin began his musical life on the piano and quickly showed an uncanny ability to absorb and reshape the sounds of his time. Though he composed everything from operas to show tunes, it was Rhapsody in Blue, written in 1924 when he was just 25, that cemented his legacy. Commissioned by bandleader Paul Whiteman for a concert intended to bridge classical and popular music, Rhapsody in Blue was composed in a rush, famously sketched out on train rides, and completed with the help of orchestrator Ferde Grofi. The piece opens with its iconic clarinet glissando, a spontaneous flourish during rehearsal that Gershwin decided to keep, and unfolds into a sweeping blend of jazz rhythms, bluesy melodies, and symphonic ambition. It captured something distinctly American, urban, restless, and full of promise. Rhapsody in Blue premiered at Aeolian Hall in New York on February 12th of 1924 with Gershwin himself at the piano. The audience included titans like Sergei Rachmaninoff and Jascha Heifetz, and the piece earned immediate acclaim. Though critics at the time debated whether it was truly serious music, it has since become a cornerstone of 20th century composition and a symbol of American cultural identity. For Gershwin, Rhapsody in Blue was not a departure from classical form, but a statement that American music, jazz, blues, Tin Pan Alley, deserved a place in the concert hall. More than a century later, it remains as fresh and vibrant as the city that inspired it. Without further ado, George Gershwin's Rhapsody in Blue, the first movement. Enjoy.